Let's go back to our other breaking news story this hour. A newly declassified US intelligence report claims Vladimir Putin ordered hackers to meddle in the US presidential elections in a bid to help Donald Trump win. Let's get analysis on this from Gregory Copley. He's editor of Defence and Foreign Affairs. Also, he's president of the International Strategic Studies Association. Welcome, Gregory. The report, it's really heavy on assertions and very light. Well, it's not even very light. It's weightless in terms of evidence. I mean, to be fair, we did hear US intelligence leaders say they weren't going to disclose some details because of confidentiality. But I think people were expecting some kind of, even a crumb of evidence. Why nothing?
Well, because there is not a lot to say. Frankly, it would have been inconceivable that the Russian government and any other government around the world did not use its electronic collection capabilities to learn as much as possible about the candidates and the possible direction of the US election. But that's not a matter of influencing the election. Secondly, we have to see that if the Russian government was itself trying to influence the election, then it did a very poor job of doing it because Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. So in other words, the message ostensibly coming from the Kremlin didn't get to the US electorate. And what saved US democracy, in a sense, was the Electoral College process, which actually restored some of the balance to the regions rather than just to the urban areas. So the reality is that there is not a lot of evidence to be had. Did the Russian government, the Russian intelligence services, and possibly at the direction of the president, try to find out everything they could from the Democratic National Committee and from the Republicans, for that matter? Almost certainly. The question is, did that collection of information have anything to do with the outcome of the election? This is a highly politically motivated and subjective report which was issued by the intelligence community, and it's not surprising that it rushed to this report whilst the Obama administration was still in office, because there's no question this was politically induced, this report. The question is, did the Obama administration and did the failed candidacy of Hillary Clinton seek to blame the Russian government for the failure of the Democrats to win the election? Almost certainly. But the reality is that this intelligence report and all of the claims about this so-called hacking is an attempt to shoot the messenger rather than to allow people to focus on the message. The fact was that there was a degree of transparency in this election because a number of people released the contents of Democratic Party emails and the like, Hillary Clinton's emails and the like, and the result was that the public saw for themselves directly and transparently what the policies and attitudes were of Hillary Clinton and her team, and they may have voted based on that information. But that's the message, and that was a message created not by the Russian intelligence services or the Russian government. These were messages created by candidate Clinton herself and her team, and the US public may well have judged the election based on that information, on that transparency. So the question is that a crime? Should not the election have been transparent? After all, President Obama said he was going to run the most transparent government in US history, and clearly what he was aiming to do and what this report actually reinforces is the fact that they did not like that transparency. They preferred the anonymity. Now, I can tell you that a lot of foreign governments were concerned about the campaign by both candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Everybody was paying attention. The reality was that the material coming out of the Democratic campaign was far more explosive, far more newsworthy, and to blame RT for carrying that information is like telling any newspaper that it shouldn't follow the scandals. Is the Obama administration also going to attack the Fox News network for carrying stories about these emails and other outlets which carried the email scandal? The reality is that, as you say, this was a very lightweight report. It was highly politically motivated. It was very subjective in its outlook, and, as you say, does not present evidence of successful or even an attempt to actually actively manipulate the election process. And yet the US itself goes into a number of elections, as it did in Ukraine and Israel and so on, and Serbia, all around the world, where it has absolutely heavy-handedly attempted to influence the outcome of elections. So there's a degree of hypocrisy in this as well. It's okay when the US does it, it's not okay when they suspect that somebody else might have done it. And frankly, they need to come up with a much better story. And more importantly, the US government itself, the outgoing government, needs to respect the democratic wishes of the voter. And what they're saying with this report is that the voters of the United States did not know what they were doing.
Yeah, it was interesting. You used the word transparency several times there, which immediately made me think of the emperor's new clothes, because Hillary Clinton either made mistakes or people wrote embarrassing things about her in those emails, and these things were exposed. It was there to be seen for what it was. And instead, there's this misdirection. No one's talking about any of the content. Instead, they're talking about how the information became public. Now, a lot was said, pages of this report dedicated to RT. The claim that there was a preference or for one candidate over the other by just reporting those facts in those emails. But if you're going to make that accusation about RT, what about all the other channels you mentioned there in the US? Surely all of those channels, they have their favourites when they have their political motivations, and it's clear to see in their reporting, isn't it?
There's no question about it. In fact, what's struck me is, and I've been a journalist for 50 years, and nobody pays me to go on and television to air a particular point of view. What I've seen with RT is that actually nobody has ever edited anything I've said on RT or tried to influence what I say in support of or maybe derogatory to a certain government. So frankly, I see the case being made against RT as spurious. And it frankly is, again, this whole concept of this administration and of the Clinton campaign and of the State Department is they do not want to accept responsibility for the outcomes based on their actions.
It's an interesting story with RT, because I came here from the very first day of the channel, and before we even launched, news outlets were saying that this was going to be a Russian propaganda channel. They were saying it as a fact before it even had launched, which I found interesting. And the messages that you hear constantly are Russia's bad in terms of the government. Now it's become RT's bad. And the two are slowly morphing into the one entity, it seems. How does the US intelligence community make these connections and draw these conclusions without basing it on any kind of evidence?
Well, that's a self-answered question. The reality is that you can see why President-elect Trump distrusts the US intelligence community under its present management. I don't think he distrusts the process of intelligence, nor does he denigrate the loyalty of a large number of the US intelligence community who have demonstrated their loyalty and patriotism. What he, I think, decries is the patent politicization of intelligence final reporting into government. And by the way, that's applied not just to this administration, but to the previous administration of President George W. Bush.
It seems as though all the kind of people that the US administration doesn't like now are all being rounded up, and the dots are being joined between them all. We're all connected now, and I feel quite privileged to be in the same company as Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, an organisation that's published a lot of facts, a lot of truths. None of them have been disproved as far as I'm aware, and yet now we've got RT accused of cooperating with WikiLeaks. An RT journalist was accused of that because he broke the story faster than a WikiLeaks member was able to release the information on Twitter. The people who accused RT of having some kind of hotline to the government, they got this horribly wrong. Why are they lumping everybody together on this? I don't see what WikiLeaks has done to lose any journalist's faith around the planet.
No, and in fact, the US media were among the first to support and champion WikiLeaks and its reporting. But when it looks as though it's going against their interests, then they can back off and change their opinion. So it's they're basically changing their opinion to suit their current mood. Everybody likes a news outlet when it says favourable things to you, but when it says unfavourable things about you, you tend to dislike it. We get the same thing with our reporting, and our organisation been reporting for 50 years on strategic issues, and we see people love us, hate us, depending on our reporting, and yet our view is that we attempt to be consistently fair and honest and fact-based, as does RT. And the question is, when you say things which are favourable, people love you. When you say things which they would rather not appear in print, they don't like it. So this is human nature. The reality is that we're seeing a degree of subjectiveness in the US media and political circles which we have never, ever seen before. We've never also seen an outgoing US administration take such a hostile view in an attempt to undermine an incoming administration ever before in US history. This is unprecedented. We're in very new territory here, and while President Obama and Michelle Obama say that they want to cooperate with the incoming administration, the reality is that they're doing everything they can to sabotage the success of the Trump administration. And President Trump is going to inherit a vast amount of problems in the economic sphere, in the ability to have influence over the domestic stability in the United States, because President Obama has gone out of his way to polarize the society, as has Hillary Clinton. President Obama has also left more conflicts around the world for an incoming president than we've seen for a long time, in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and in Libya, just to name the obvious ones. So we're seeing that this administration has left a ruined landscape economically, politically, and socially and strategically for the incoming administration. And President Obama is doing his best to undermine the chances for success by President-elect Trump.
And finally, Gregory, as someone with a lot of journalistic experience, I just want to ask you one about the media, because RT was mentioning, 5 pages of this report. So it's an implication, it's a kind of a sly nod and a wink that we're doing something wrong. But of course, if we did anything that was wrong, or there was anything incorrect, factually wrong, it would be pointed out, we would be pulled up on it. In fact, I'd make the argument that actually RT has to be of a higher journalistic standard than most organisations, because there's so much attention on us and so much scrutiny. Now, if we look to organisations in the US, publications and channels, there have been numerous occasions now, I can think of one from the Washington Post, where they had to make retractions because they put out stories that weren't true. It seems that the last year there's been an awful lot of stories put out, a lot of repeating what the government has to say, and no one's providing evidence. How do you assess journalistic standards in the US at the moment?
Well, journalistic standards in the US, and I venture to say globally, are declining dramatically. We are seeing far more subjective journalism portrayed as news reporting than ever before. We're seeing a far greater use of adjectives, a far greater use of loaded terminology than we've ever seen. There's far less real investigative work to verify material than I've ever seen in my career. I would say that there's hardly a journalist on the mainstream media today in the US, for that matter in Australia or Britain, that I would hire to do an objective, analytical job of work.
Gregory, it's been really interesting to get your thoughts on a whole range of issues there. Thanks so much for joining us this hour here on RT. Gregory Copley, the editor of Defence and Foreign Affairs, also president of the International Strategic Studies Association. Thanks, Gregory.
Thank you.